Laws governing cannabis in South Africa is what we are looking at once again in the spotlight. In a recent case, a woman in Upington was convicted for the sale of 300 rands worth of cannabis. Her sentence included the forfeiture of her property. Advocates for the consistent application of cannabis enforcement laws say this particular punishment does not fit the crime. What the case is highlighting are disparities in how laws are applied. For more on this discussion, I'm joined now by Tebogo Tlhopane from the Cannabis Trade and Advocacy Association, as well as Advocate Gareth Prince, who is also joining us on the line. He's the president for the Cannabis Hemp community there. Right, gentlemen, good to have you, and thank you very much for coming on this afternoon. Let me begin with you, Tebogo. I mean, is this a precedent-setting ruling by the courts, or is there a body of law, jurisprudence, that was applied here that maybe previously would have come up with a similar outcome?
Thank you, Tabo, for having us as CTA here, and you know we always appreciate coming on your show to try and solve some of these issues that we have in the country. So, if you look at it from that that question, if this same situation was placed in Gauteng or in Cape Town, I don't think anybody would have gone to jail. That would have been thrown out of court. So it seems that there's different laws for different provinces. There seems to be an inconsistency of application of law as well, and clearly a confusion there is. Because Gareth here will also agree with me that there was a moratorium on arrest that was agreed upon 2 years ago at a pakisa that was organized by the president. Mm-hmm. And in that forum, a moratorium was produced and it was signed in May, I would say, just literally immediately after that, to allow that while we are busy with the laws, where we're sitting, Gareth and I as well, with the Cannabis Master Plan Committee, is that we can then allow the process to take place, but do not arrest people on things that we don't even understand at the current juncture, because we're still using the law that is apartheid law. This is 1992 law. If you look at how this house was forfeited, they applied 1992 Drugs and Drug Trafficking Act, which makes no sense.
Right.
When we are talking about progress, when we are telling the rest of the world that we're ready to do business, yeah, but we are arresting moms that are trying to feed their kids. Right. It makes no sense. Yeah. It needs to be consistent.
Advocate Prince can come in here. I mean, the case of Lucia Lowe. What was the Northern Cape court saying in how they interpreted this particular case?
Good afternoon, and thanks for having us. So, Ms. Lucia Lowe and another accomplice was found guilty of dealing in dagga, which, as the law currently stands, even under the Cannabis for Private Purposes Act, which has not yet been implemented, dealing in dagga is prohibited. But the anomaly, Tabo, is that the Cannabis for Private Purposes Act does not make provision for a legal source of cannabis. So despite the fact that adult citizens in South Africa have the right to use, possess, and cultivate cannabis, there is no legal source where they can buy seeds or they can buy clones or where they can buy cannabis. And science have told us that cannabis is exponentially less dangerous than alcohol and tobacco. Yeah. And we have a situation in South Africa where those who sell cigarettes to children and those who sell alcohol illegally, they do not get their houses forfeited for engaging in an illegal act. Yeah. But somebody who sells cannabis, 300 rands worth of cannabis, yeah, now runs the risk of having her house forfeited, because technically speaking, the law allows the forfeiture of a house or a car if it is proven that that house or that car was instrumental in the committing of that crime.
All right.
So
right.
obviously the lady sold the cannabis at her house to this undercover agent.
Yes.
And on that basis, the magistrate held that Section 252 of the Criminal Procedure Act was satisfied, which allows them to use a trap or the notion of entrapment, and that therefore, seeing that they were found guilty, that the law then allowed them to apply that this house be forfeited. But that is what, in terms of our constitution, that would constitute cruel and unusual punishment. It's akin to using a sledgehammer to crack a nut. Because if you ask yourself, what is the danger? In this country, there is this false narrative that drugs are responsible for the calamities and the problems that we have in our society.
I don't want us to focus really on that moral debate, because we've had it before. I know this particular is a little bit more technical than I want to understand. That one I know we've had before. We've had you here advocated, and we've gone to town with that particular one. Let's understand what is going on here, because you cannot. You don't understand?
You cannot think in a vacuum.
I want you to go back 2 steps, because you're talking of a broken system. So you're saying even with the bill that was applauded and everybody was happy about it for private use, you are saying that particular bill doesn't imagine where you're going to get seeds, where you're going to buy this cannabis for your own private use. So what does it say? It's just going to appear magically in your house, and then you can consume it privately in your house if it appears that way.
It would, Thabo, it would seem that constitutional court judges and parliamentarians, they seem to live in a different reality than the rest of us. Because there cannot be any use, possession, or cultivation without having a legal source of cannabis. So the fact that we now have an act that's been signed into law, although not yet been promulgated, that act is irrational at best and arbitrary at worst, because it requires of any adult that wants to use cannabis, that adult must risk his or her freedom, integrity, and dignity if they want to go and get cannabis. That is the hardcore reality. And in the 7 years since the Constitutional Court judgment, we have not yet been able to convince government to provide for a legal source of cannabis. So despite the fact that for the past 7 years, in theory, we have had a right to use, possess, and cultivate, in reality, we have not been able to manifest that right. And SAPS, in that 7 years, have continued to arrest more than 1 million people on drug-related charges. And users of cannabis is consistently associated with a drug culture. And there is absolutely no scientific basis for the government to do that. So, and they deny the fact that this is a cultural issue and not a criminal issue.
So, Tebogo, more and more people being arrested for selling or maybe even having possession of cannabis in this country. And you're saying even there's inconsistency in how penalties or sanctions are meted out?
100%. I mean, if you look at the case of Lucia Lowe, is that, and echoing what Gareth is saying, it's a sledgehammer into an operation of 300 Rand. To you to have an undercover, I mean, that whole thing, it means that they're suspecting that this lady is Pablo Escobar. I mean, that's ridiculous. So coming back to the issue of how do we then effectively making sure that there's again, equitability within this space, because there isn't. Remember, there are legal licenses that are issued by Department of Health through the regulator SAPRA. Now, those people that are farming these products, they are farming them to export. Now, that's the intention. Now, that's not what's happening right now. What you find is that you've got this flower ending up on the market, and people like Lucia Lowe, who trying to earn a living and participating in the whole action and participating in terms of making income. And this is the issue that has been raised across the board. Now, as the Cannabis Trade Association, we're saying, let it be equitable.
Yeah.
as much as we're saying that we're trying to fix the law and so forth and so on, but we're screaming out loud to say we are open for business.
Right.
Here we are, we want to export.
Right.
But what are we doing for people like her
Now,
to support her?
Tebogo and Advocate Prince, stay with me because that's where I want us to go next. What must change? What exactly are you saying must change? When we return from the break, to stay with us. Back on the newsfeed, PM talking the selective enforcement of cannabis laws in the country, and we are joined by Advocate Prince as well as Tebogo Tlhopane with us in the studio. Let's talk about what must change. Advocate Prince, firstly, what must change in the case of Lucia Low? A call for justice, what does it entail? 300 rands worth of cannabis and a house was taken.
So what we need is for the discretionary powers of the police in the first place must be articulated. As it stands, the police does not seem to accept the validity of the Constitutional Court judgment. It cannot simply be business as usual in relation to the usage of cannabis. The underlying act of using cannabis is now legal. However, you find that any attempt to provide people with cannabis is illegal. So the right cannot be manifested in reality.
Yeah.
So for that matter, it would require that there be a nationwide moratorium on arrest of people for seeking to buy cannabis, or there would have to be, the government would have to appoint, whether they give non-profit organizations the license to produce and provide cannabis to those who want it, seeing as the law seemingly wants to prohibit gangsters and criminals from making profit from selling cannabis, rather than give the right to produce to non-profit organizations. Like, for instance, in the Rastafari movement, the church would be a non-profit organization. And such organizations should have the right then to provide cannabis for their members. Because the reality is that millions of people in South Africa cannot cultivate for themselves. And what happens to the 3-4 months in which your plant must grow, and then you must harvest it, and then you must dry it, and then you must cure it? What happens in that period of time? Are you now just supposed to forget and sacrifice your right or your choice to use cannabis? That cannot be correct. But the police continues to single cannabis out because cannabis arrest forms part of their key performance index. So cannabis arrest makes the police look good. It makes them look as if they are doing their job, but they are not. And they are acting in violation of court orders. The court held that it is the duty of Parliament to prove to us objectively that it is necessary for them to use arrest for the regulation of cannabis. And as we've said, and it's not just us, it's several other courts, Canadian, appeal courts have said that to use arrest to regulate cannabis is akin to using a sledgehammer to crack a nut.
Yeah.
And in terms of our constitutional order, that is not allowed.
Right. So, Tebogo, the discretionary powers of the police need to be policed, it seems. But two, there needs to be almost a national cannabis framework that clearly defines what is possession, what is cultivation, and what is the dealing threshold.
Well, the issue is, as Gareth Prince has said, people want to smoke cannabis at their own private spaces whenever they want to, constitutionally allowed. We have a judgment that says so. If you don't have a private space, what do you do? If you don't know how to cultivate, what do you do? So we need to allow social club models. For example, we see these models that are existing in countries like Spain, where, and echoing to what Gareth has said in terms of the church from a Rastafari point of view, would that be that association of social clubs, people coming together in sharing? And that's the model that I think that would work in South Africa. That's the model under the situation where we don't have a legal framework to sell cannabis, but we do have a legal protection to work within the social club, to work with other members, to say, you and you, we come together. I'll be the cultivator for argument's sake, and then we all club together to make sure that people get their cannabis wherever they want to get it. Now, the social club model, as the Cannabis Trade Association, we push for that, and we're saying that's the only model that will work right now until we can actually get to the point where we have a dispensary model. And we are sitting at the Committee for the Cannabis Master Plan, and these are the things that we are discussing on a daily basis. But I think it's important.
I mean, I've seen a couple of
exactly my point. There's
shops that are clearly displaying that they sell
absolutely and
product containing cannabis.
And the social club guidance is that as the association, we try to guide, and I think people can send an email to our association if they want guidance, info@cta.org.za, in order to give them the guidance on how do you then go about be part of a social club. What are the guardrails of a social club so that it protects you from these kind of things that Lucia Lowe has gone through, in a sense that you have these members that you're working with and you are able to assist them. As I said, there are people out there who don't have a private spaces, nor even the skills to do it. So we have to balance those abilities, those discrepancies, if you can put it that way, to say, on one hand, you've got people that want to smoke cannabis and entertain themselves in any way they want. It's in their right. On the other hand, there is just no legal way to do it.
Right.
So how do you fuse the two together? We've got a constitutional judgment that says, I can do it in my private spaces.
Right.
It's about how do we then creatively work within those perimeters to allow that we can. And I think that our association
then protect small users, small cultivars especially, who intend to distribute it. Then finally, as we wrap up, I mean, is there a framework, Advocate Prince, for a retroactive review of this conviction of Lucia Lowe?
Yes. Well, the Cannabis for Private Purposes Act have suggested that convictions for possession would be expunged, right, retroactively in that sense. But convictions for dealing would stand. And we have said that the least that government can do for the cannabis community is to ensure that all previous convictions for cannabis-related offenses be automatically expunged so that people can start with a clean slate. And if we are going to make a success of the Cannabis Master Plan, then it is important that we accept that there cannot be a regime of commercialization coupled with criminalization. So we have to accept that cannabis is now part and parcel of our society, as it has always been in this country. The fact that we've had 400 years of racist laws that sought to prohibit the usage of this substance for medicinal, commercial, and recreational usages, that must cease, right? Because South African citizens, and especially indigenous South African citizens, have the right to pick up the pieces of that culture from which they were forcefully alienated because of apartheid and slavery, and use this plant in order to lift themselves out of the dregs of poverty and despair. So we want to work with Parliament and we want to work with the lawmakers in order to ensure that there is justice for the cannabis community. And we want restorative justice for the people of the cannabis, because it cannot be just that those who suffered and those who put themselves on the front line for the liberation of this plant are now the ones that are forced to stand on the sideline, whereas people who never did anything, who never made any sacrifices for this plant are now the ones who are first in line, because everybody is seeing rand and dollar and pound signs out of this industry, which correctly it can generate, but it is not just about money, it is about justice at the end of the day, and justice especially for the indigenous Aboriginal people who suffered dearly as a result. Look at the result of Ms. Lucia Low now, where herself and her children and her family must now forfeit their home for 300 rands worth of cannabis that was sold to an undercover agent. That is cruel and unusual punishment that is not in line with our constitutional order.
Let's talk about those undercover agents. I mean, are you not concerned that more of your members would be subject to these entrapment type cases?
Look, I mean, as we said, there seems to be different laws for different provinces. And I made an example that in Joburg, that would not even made it to court. Similar, I would say, with Cape Town, and similar, I would say, with Durban. What is troubling, and I think in our case, is that if we are saying there's a legislation that allows that we could have a social club, that we and I and friends can come together in order for us to share cannabis, because some of us don't know how to grow it, some of us don't have a private spaces. The law allows that. I think we need to educate the justice system, we need to educate SAPs on understanding these nuances. And I think there has to be some level of training that needs to go in there. Even after all of these things, the Cannabis for Private People's Bill has been enacted and properly promulgated, is that you're still going to have that education process that needs to take place. Even our politicians require education. I think we still struggle with this amazing propaganda that was perpetuated by the apartheid government for a very long time. And we're still using that law, we're still using that mentality. We are literally colonized and trapped in our own heads. And I think it's time that we re-educate and remove that. And the only way we can do that is we galvanize the entire nation to say, we need to bring up this conversation. We have all the different conversations taking place, the President zone and dialogues taking place. I think we need to have a dialogue about cannabis and saying, really, let's engage. Let's really talk about what this is and how is it beneficial and why can I have a choice? You have a choice of your own alcohol, somebody have a choice of cigarettes, you know what I mean? And we're talking about something that has literally globally, it's been opened up for commercial purposes. From a medicinal point of view, there's no jury we're not even questioning whether is cannabis medicinal anymore. We know that it is. So why are we still having this conversation that seems to be in silos? Why are we still having this conversation that seems that we're still very confused as a nation, that we don't even understand where we're going? And I think it starts at the top. Our education must start with the politicians, the police, justice systems, everybody, so that we can then have a situation where these kind of cases, do not waste the court's time. There are serious crimes we have in our country, as you know, that would demand an undercover situation like that. I would be very happy if one is taking place around my area, there's pollution taking place, people are burning, illegal dumping and chemicals, and we're breathing all these things. That should be an undercover situation right there, because these are the things that are affecting population, the health of the people, not cannabis. It's like, again, sledgehammer on some really little problem. For the fact that cannabis still sits as a KPI within SAPs tells you that it's a lower hanging fruit. If you want to be able to say, I arrested 100 people, you can quickly just stand on the side of the corner. Soweto and many other townships are victimized on a daily basis by police going around there and making this unnecessary arrest. At the end of the day, they don't even get to court. And they don't get to court here in Gauteng. But in Upington, for some reason, special place for whatever case may be. Whether they're backwards or whatever the case may be, we need to change these things. These cases should not even have been in court in the first place.
Let's leave it there. Appreciate you, gentlemen. Thank you very much for coming on. That's Tebogo Tlhopane, Cannabis Trade and Advocacy Association, as well as Advocate Gareth Prince, member of the Presidential Cannabis and Hemp Steering Committee.